Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us here at the IMF for the Governor's Talk. It is my great pleasure to introduce Yemi Cardoso, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, who, before taking his current appointment about 6 months ago, I think almost exactly, had a long and distinguished career in both private banking and the public sector. To put it mildly, it has been a period of much challenge and hugely important reforms in the monetary area in Nigeria. So it's a great opportunity to hear from us directly from him how he has gone about leading his team in addressing the challenges that he has faced. Thank you so much, Yemi, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Governor, you inherited tightly managed and, to put it mildly, again, overvalued exchange rates, and have taken some really bold policy decisions to end the system of multiple fixed exchange rates that you had. If I could ask how you approached the sequencing of reforms, what issues gave you most cause for concern, and how you went about mitigating the risks?
Thank you very much. That's quite a jam-packed question there. I will try and unpack it as best as I can. I would say, and again, let me say a very big thank you for having me here today, actually over the past few days, because I've taken the opportunity to listen and exchange views and understand much better the problems that are facing the global economy. So that's a very unique opportunity for which I want to say a very, very big thank you for the invitation. Now, with respect to Nigeria and the sequencing of events and sequencing of reforms, I think in terms of context, it's clear that for those who don't know, that I came in at a time of very, very great difficulty for the central bank and the monetary authorities. Of course, inflation was high and the exchange rate was under tremendous stress. And there was a crisis of confidence. And in such a situation, the biggest challenge, as far as I can see, was that of trust and the deficit in trust. People simply had the impression that things were bad. There was fear, and somehow they didn't see any end in sight to what seemed like a very gloomy situation. So it was very important to understand that, and in terms of sequencing, do whatever it was possible, take the necessary steps to begin the process of building back trust. Now, that is not something that happens overnight. And I recall that when I went for the Senate hearings, one of the things I said at the time was that I recognized the fact that there was a huge backlog of about $7 billion in forward transactions which had not been met and which seemed to provide a lot of apprehension to Nigerians. And I made a commitment to take care of them. How I was going to do that, I didn't know. But I thought it was very important to make that commitment there in order to build back the trust deficit that one was going into. And also, I had to reach out to various stakeholders, particularly the international investors. And in actual fact, the first day I started at the bank, one of the first groups I dealt with were the international investors, because they had been following activities and they were very keen to know what was going on. And I felt it was very important to continue to have that dialogue, okay, which I did, and use that as an opportunity, as I said, to rebuild trust with people and with various stakeholders. And then, of course, the next thing in terms of sequencing was to make it abundantly clear that the era of interventions, which really hadn't taken us anywhere, were over. And that I intended to go back to orthodox monetary policy. So I think those were very, very important things to make very clear. And I think that helped, obviously, to set the stage for what came after. It was very important to continue to re-emphasize those things in the process of building trust. Of course, communication was also very key, and it has to also be sequenced. And I know that at the outset, there was concern that one was not saying enough. But there was a strategy to that, because I felt it was important to, at the outset, come out and say things you needed to say when you needed to say them. And I recall that at a particular forum, which was the Chartered Institute of Bankers, which is held on a yearly basis, I used that opportunity to communicate very strongly. And normally, that is a forum that perhaps, the governors talk for maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, and I took over an hour. Okay, but I made sure I got everything, including giving forward guidance with respect to the banking sector, and to let people know that we were going to have a recapitalization exercise. This was in November, and the guidelines didn't come out till just recently. So they had plenty of time to start thinking that through. So these are some of the sequences that we went through. In terms of what kept me, some of the issues that one was concerned about and how did I approach them and all that, there was a lot of worry with respect to the excess money supply, and one had to take bold measures with respect to mopping up liquidity, and then subsequently, of course, hiking interest rates. And I know that the first monetary policy committee meeting we had, I did a 400 basis point increase, which was unprecedented. Mm-hmm. But we had to do it. We had to do it. We had no choice. And we followed that up with another 200 basis points. And we had to do that also, because to the extent that we'd committed to price stability, we were convinced that we had to do whatever was necessary to ensure that prices and inflation the right steps were put in place to ensure that we got there. Now, in saying all this, it's also important to recognize, and I say this all the time, that whatever policies you make, if they don't impact the man on the street, then you've not done anything.
Absolutely. So I have a question on that, and it's a good way to segue to that, which is, you've emphasized how important communication was, particularly bankers and other stakeholders. But exactly this point on how to influence expectations. If essentially what you've embarked on is a shift towards an inflation targeting regime, at least you're moving in that direction. So, and what you're losing in a way is like the exchange rate being used as a nominal anchor, as one of the big inputs in terms of setting expectations. How is it that you're communicating with people on the streets? How is it that you're expecting and hoping to influence behavior and price setting activity?
Sure, it's a very good question, and I think the answer to that is that one is also reasonable in expectations, knowing fully well that all these things will not transform overnight. In actual fact, when we look at the situation of Nigeria, a lot of the problems that have happened there in terms of the monetary side have taken place over a long period of time. And I think continuous dialogue and communication is essential in letting people understand why we're doing certain things, where we're trying to get to, and continuously going back to re-emphasize what we've done. We've used the opportunity of the MPC to have a question and answer session after every MPC, which basically gives everybody the opportunity to ask all the questions they want and for us to re-emphasize the certain measures we're taking and why we're making and why we're doing that. And we will continue to do so. And in actual fact, we will strengthen the communication mechanisms that we have in place. We will certainly not take it for granted that people understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing that, because it is quite a complex subject, to be perfectly honest. Okay. That even for those who are the most enlightened, they sometimes struggle. So to that extent, we will do everything possible to use different platforms, as the case may be, to ensure that we can reach out to as many as possible. I do think that what we've seen recently with regards to the exchange rate, okay, helps to give people hope, in the sense that when I started, we had a situation where within about a month or two, we were regarded as having the worst performing currency of any country. 6 months later, we are judged to have the best performing currency of any country. So I think those things speak for themselves. A situation where in the recent past, the greatest amount of liquidity on a daily basis was in the region of $200-300 million US, to a situation where over the course of the past 6 months, we've traded up to $1 billion.
This is FX liquidity.
Yes. So the FX liquidity has certainly, taken a center stage, quite frankly, in the activities of the monetary side. And I think people see that. They see the exchange rate coming down. They understand that, or we continue to talk about the fact that the pass-through, there's a lag, but ultimately the objective is to ensure we can moderate inflation.
Thank you, Yemi. Of course, in the background to the conduct of monetary policy is the fairly sizable fiscal deficit that the government runs, the federal government runs. And the financing of that deficit has been one of the sources of pressure for looser monetary policy. How is it that you're coordinating with your minister, your counterpart, Wale, in how are you calibrating policies? Have you started coordinating better? And how is it that you expect the federal government will fund itself on a sustainable basis?
Yes. And another very good question, and a question that comes up quite regularly. And of course, first and foremost, let me be upfront in saying that the monetary policy is just one side of it, no question about that. And with the whole inflation targeting objective, which you spoke about earlier, we can't do it without successfully collaborating with the fiscal side. It simply will not work. So it's clear to us that we need to have a very good handshake with the fiscal side, and a handshake that takes us in the direction that we want to go to. We understand, of course, that, again, breaking that down, that the food inflation, perhaps we can use that as a good example. Food inflation is something that is not within the purview of the monetary side. But we definitely work together and rub minds together. And recently, we had some fertilizers which had come out from the previous administration, okay, and we, pushed that over to the Ministry of Agriculture to help them, okay, going into the next planting season with respect to meeting their overall objectives. In the NPC, we have the presence of very, very senior leadership from the fiscal side as a member of the Monetary Policy Committee in the person of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, and who is here today. And we always have very good and open dialogue on issues, so we're able to hear the different sides of the situation. And indeed, beyond that, we've set up different committees that work hand in hand with respect to ensuring that we are on the same page with respect to taming inflation. Now, I think it is also commendable that the Ministry of Finance have themselves begun that process of reducing the outstanding, monetizing the outstanding, securitizing, I beg your pardon, the outstanding ways and means. And I think that is extremely commendable. And I think it's less of an issue now, so we can work better together, bearing in mind, as I said, that as we move to inflation targeting, it's going to have to be a very strong partnership for it to be successful.
Thank you, Yemi. I want to leave a bit of time for questions from the floor. So one last question from me. It strikes me that you really have achieved quite a bit over the last 6 months in office. You highlighted the overshoot and then now correction the exchange rate. Mm-hmm. But I mean, stepping back a little bit, as a policymaker, wearing this hat, playing this very important role, what are one or two key lessons that you take away from your first 6 months in office?
I cannot overemphasize the importance of trust. I cannot overemphasize it. And to be honest, when I look back on it, irrespective of the courage, the boldness to do certain things, and the understanding of issues that many may not understand by virtue of the fact that you have access to data and other things, if the trust isn't there, you will suboptimize. So it's clear to me that trust is so critical in successfully anchoring a major task like this. Trust is very, very, very important. And then in terms of lessons also, I think a bit surprising, quite frankly, that perhaps one had expected that there was a greater understanding of a lot of the issues. Complex though they are, one expected there was a greater understanding. And then another lesson is the fact that one found, and again, communication is very important in this, that expectations of people of the central bank, in my view, were totally misplaced. People expected you could wave a wand and that would be the end of the problems. And in fact, in many cases, blamed you for the woes that you had nothing to do with, other than the fact that you were there to try and find solutions. And on one or two occasions, I actually had to remind people that, listen, I didn't do this. I am part of the solution. So please, let's roll up our sleeves and work together to ensure that we can, surmount them, rather than, at some point in time, pretty hostile reactions.
If I could have a quick follow-up. I mean, you've emphasized the importance of credibility, trust, but how much was that garnered by doing the policies that you did? Or was it something that, is it just your words that you think allowed you to build that trust and confidence?
Yes, I think consistency in saying certain things and then doing them, I think, was very important. And again, I think we have a situation today where Nigerians are very restless and people were very impatient. They wanted results very quickly. But you had to come out and explain why it couldn't happen overnight. You had to be honest about it. And even with the policies that you put out, where certain things needed to be tweaked, you needed to have the humility to tweak them.
Agility and nimbleness and recalibrating as needed also. Okay, so I think we have some mics for people that may want to raise questions. Gentleman right at the back behind it. If you could say what institution you're with and one question, very short one, please, so we can have 2-3 questions.
Thank you. My name is Ifechukwu Ndoka. I'm Executive Director in Risk Management at Morgan Stanley, New York. So my question is, most developing nations, including Nigeria, would use external savings to finance developments, which makes currency risk a dominant risk factor. So now the question is, what are your views, or what is your leadership doing in making or developing currency risk markets as a policy imperative instead of as an inspiration to tame, the inflationary pressures that Nigeria is facing?
Thank you. The lady here in front, please, in green. We're going to take 3 questions, and then I'll...
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Nkechi Nana. I'm with Arise News. One of the things that the bank has tried to do to bring solution to what we've been facing in Nigeria is defend the Naira. So, Mr. Governor, if you can just clarify for us how much has been spent in defending the Naira in the first quarter of this year. And this defense, is it from our reserves or from FPI inflows? And if it's from the reserves, which have now been depleting, and with the IMF projecting a further drop to, I think, $24 billion later in the year, can the bank realistically continue with this strategy? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lady over there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor. My name is Titilayo Adebola. I'm an academic at the University of Aberdeen and the president of the African International Economic Law Network. I was wondering how you would like to engage with the academic community in Nigeria and the diaspora to curate informed recommendations based on empirical and doctrinal research. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Governor,
yes.
First question on currency risk. Yes. If you're doing anything on addressing or facilitating, encouraging currency risk markets. And then you heard the question about, what it's going to take to defend the Naira and engagement with the academic community.
Sure. Okay. Currency risk, the answer to that is yes. But again, these things need to be sequenced. So in due course, as and when those policies come out, I think people will know exactly where we are headed in that direction. But it's certainly something that we are looking at. We're looking at that. Defending the Naira, which from every indication seems to be an elephant in some room. Now, I want to try and make this as clear as possible. It is not our intention to defend the Naira. It is not. And much as I have read in the recent few days some opinions with respect to what is happening with our reserves and the central bank defending the Naira, if you think back to what our overall policy and philosophy has been here, you can see it's counterintuitive. Okay, basically, what we're encouraging is for the market to willing buyer, willing seller, price discovery. And ultimately, I perceive a future where central bank will really not need to intervene, okay, except in very, very unusual circumstances. What is important to us is that there's sufficient liquidity in the market, which I've spoken about here today. Fine, 1 billion is the outlier. Sometimes it's 600, 700 million US, as the case may be, and that will continue, hopefully. So as long as we have a vibrant currency market, why do we need to go in there to intervene? We don't need to. I can understand that, especially at the outset, there have been little cases where the Bureau de Change, the BDC, there was a need to get that segment going. And, you know, small amounts of money, relatively tiny amounts of money have gone into that to catalyze that happening. Because it's important that, again, individuals have access to funds to send abroad, their kids abroad and do things which are important, health, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important not to keep them out of the mainstay. So that, yes. But in terms of intervention, frankly, that's really not our intention at all to intervene in the money market. And what you've seen with respect to the shifts in our reserves is the shifts that you find in any country's reserve situation, where, for example, debts are due and certain payments need to be made. They are made because that is also part of keeping your credibility intact. And other times, money comes in and, you know, takes it up again. And if you watch in the next couple of days, I think between yesterday and today, we had about 600 million US that came into the reserves account. So I wouldn't let people get too excited about this thing. All I will say is that we are looking towards ensuring that we have a market that operates on its own, willing buyer, willing seller, and price discovery. That's where we're going to. The shifts you've seen in our reserves has really, you know, little or nothing to do with defending any naira, and that's certainly not our objective. Then community engagement. Yes, I must say that within the central bank, I'm very proud of the fact that we have a very, very strong academic community within that environment. It's something to be very proud about. And I can say that if there's one thing that surprised me going into the central bank, I had no idea that the bank had that level and that quality of resources. I had absolutely no idea. So I think as things begin to settle, you will find a very vibrant community that is willing to look out and collaborate with their peers in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Governor. You know, we have a little bit of time left, and I couldn't help but feel like I need to ask you a question. You know, what is it about the political economy environment? Of course, there were elections last year, but what is it that has changed to allow you to position yourself like this on the naira? I mean, our countries generally, the tendency is to support exchange rates. The instinct, I should say, is to have strong exchange rates, support the exchange rate, defend the exchange rate as was posed. But, you know, is it simply that we've run out of reserves, we've run out of room, or you're seeing exports being impacted tremendously? Is it economic circumstances, or is it political that's allowing you this room for maneuver? I think
it's a combination of both. I think on the fiscal side and on the leadership, on the political leadership, I think there's pretty strong understanding of what needs to be done to get Nigeria out of a pretty difficult situation. And I also believe that seeing the massive swings we saw where the naira was almost falling off the cliff, really didn't need for any more, you didn't need any more, you need that minimum conviction to be able to say that, look, this has to be a way, a certain way and manner of doing things with fixed exchange rates didn't work. And we just needed to be bold enough to try something different. And I think that helped in many ways. At the same time, I must say, not easy, because in a situation like that, people are extremely impatient, and many don't believe that the path you're taking will get you there. But I think we were resolute enough, and we were prepared to take the hard decisions quickly enough that made a difference.
Governor Cardoso, Yemi, thank you so much for sharing your experience, the lessons that you've learned. It's certainly salutary and really important for many other countries also. Thank you so much, Governor.
Thank you very much.